Sacred sleep. Each night, without fail, we return to it. The closing of the eyes, the soft surrender, the slow drift into a place we do not fully understand. We call it sleep, as if it were nothing more than rest, as if it were merely the silence between two stretches of waking. But perhaps it is not a break from life at all. Perhaps it is a return to something deeper, a place older than memory and closer than breath, a place not of forgetting, but of remembering. Sacred sleep. It sounds poetic. It sounds mythic. But maybe that is exactly what we've forgotten. That the myth was never a lie, only a way to point toward a truth too big for waking language. Across centuries, across civilizations, people once treated sleep with reverence, not because they were naive, not because they lacked science, but because they listened. And they noticed what we often ignore, that something profound happens when the world goes quiet, and we finally stop performing. The Egyptians believed that dreams were messages from gods, delivered in sleep as sacred dispatches. The Greeks built temples, real temples, where the sick would come to sleep and wait for visions that could heal. The Mayans, the shamans, the mystics, they didn't treat sleep as unconsciousness. They treated it as a door, and they weren't wrong. In sleep, something changes. The ego that governs the day, the part of us that judges, edits, calculates, protects, it softens. And beneath it, something older emerges, something raw, something unfiltered, a language made not of words, but of symbols. Fire, water, light, an animal with no name, a voice without a mouth, a hallway that stretches forever. It is not chaos. It is scripture, only not the kind we read, the kind we feel. Sacred sleep is not about rest. It is about return. A return to the hidden places within us, the ones we bury during the day because they're too strange, too painful, too beautiful to carry while we answer emails and wait in traffic. But they wait for us, and in sleep, they rise. They speak. You may not remember the dream, but the dream remembers you. And sometimes, just sometimes, you wake up changed. Why is that? Why does a dream leave you breathless, like something ancient just touched you and slipped away before you could name it? Why do we sometimes wake with tears, or relief, or a knowing that doesn't belong to any waking logic? Science tells us about RM cycles and neurotransmitters and the shifting dance of the brain. And all of that is true. But none of it explains why someone dreams of a lost loved one and wakes healed. None of it explains the weight of the unspoken message, the kind you can't translate, but feel in your chest like a heartbeat you forgot was yours. That is sacred sleep. A place where the soul walks. A place where time unravels. A place where you meet yourself, not the self you perform, but the one who waits behind every distraction, every obligation, every version of who you think you're supposed to be. This is not metaphor. It is experience. And yet, we rush it. We avoid it. We treat sleep as a mechanical function, an inconvenience, a checkbox. We dose it, track it, interrupt it. We let our screens light the bed where the mystery waits, and the temple stays unopened. But what if we changed? What if we treated sleep as a ritual, not a routine? What if we prepared for it the way a pilgrim prepares for the sacred, with stillness, with reverence, with intention? Not because it makes us better, but because it makes us honest. Because in sleep, there is no pretending. In sleep, we return to the place where masks fall away, where symbols speak louder than speech, where truth arrives not in explanation, but in the shape of a garden, or a fire, or a shadow that says your name. Sacred sleep is not a superstition. It is an invitation to heal what has gone unspoken, to retrieve what has been lost, to remember that you are more than what the day has asked you to become. So tonight, when you feel the weight behind your eyes, do not resist. Close them. Let the mind fall. Let the breath deepen. Let the temple open. Not because you're escaping life, but because you're about to return to it. Sleeper's mirror. There is a mirror that you only face when the lights go out, not the kind made of glass and silver, not the one on your wall or in your bathroom. This one hangs inside your mind, unseen, unfixed, untouched by daylight. It waits in the quiet folds of sleep. And every night, as your body surrenders to rest, the mirror begins to shine. We call them dreams, but perhaps we should call them something else. Reflections. Because what if dreaming is not about escape, not about nonsense or fantasy or strange hallucinations? What if it's the mind unmasked? What if your dreams are not showing you the world outside, but the self beneath? The parts of you too honest for daylight. The thoughts that don't ask for permission. The feelings you'd rather not admit. The mirror doesn't flatter. It reveals. And that's the discomfort of it. In waking life, we wear roles like layers: parent, partner, friend, professional. We smile when it's expected. We nod when we must. We filter our speech, our thoughts, even our posture. It is survival. It is society. But sleep does not care for performance. When the choreography of waking life breaks, when there's no one left to impress, when you finally fall through the floor of consciousness, that's when the mirror rises. And it does not lie. You might dream of flying, not because you want freedom, but because you need it. You might dream of drowning, not because you're afraid of water, but because something in your life is pulling you under. You might run endlessly and never move. You might scream and make no sound. You might see the face of someone who's been gone for years, and yet feel their presence more vividly than anyone you know today. These are not random images. They are emotional X-rays, reflections of what your waking self has tried to suppress. The dream world is not fiction. It's you, unfiltered, unmasked, unchained. And the mirror doesn't always show what you want to see. Often, it shows what you need to understand. It speaks in metaphors, because truth wrapped in symbols is sometimes the only way the heart can accept it. And what's most haunting is this: the mirror sees you even when you refuse to see yourself. Think about the dreams that return again and again. The hallway with no end. The teeth falling out. The test you didn't study for. The fire you can't find the source of. They are not puzzles to solve. They are reflections that persist because the truth they show still waits to be claimed. Recurring dreams are mental fingerprints. They press down night after night, asking, "Will you look now? Will you face it yet?" And then there are the nightmares. We treat them like enemies, intrusions, but they might be the most honest reflections of all. In nightmares, the masks are gone. The fears we deny in waking life, shame, failure, trauma, desire, they rise with teeth and smoke and shadow. You wake sweating, shaking, terrified, but also more awake than before, because nightmares don't coddle. They confront. The sleeper's mirror is ruthless, but it is not cruel. It shows us what we've buried, and in showing, it begins to free us. Then there are the rare nights, the lucid ones, the nights where you realize, even inside the dream, that you're dreaming. You take the mirror in your hands. You become the sculptor of your own reflection. You fly. You create. You heal. Or maybe you destroy. But even then, even in control, you are not escaping the mirror. You are choosing how to face it. And that choice speaks volumes. Because what you do with the mirror when you hold it, that reveals who you are more than any action in waking life. Science tells us dreams are neurological byproducts, the mind sorting data, processing emotion, consolidating memory. And yes, those things are true. But science cannot explain why dreams leave us changed, why we wake in tears, why we carry the weight of a single image for years, why some dreams feel more like confessions than sleep. Maybe it's because we saw something in the mirror that we can't unsee. And maybe we were meant to. But most people wake and forget. They brush the reflection aside. They move on. Because truth is uncomfortable. And comfort, for many, is more bearable than honesty. But if you dare to look, really look, you begin to see the threads, the symbols, the patterns. You see yourself stitched across a landscape of fire, water, strangers, and silence. And once you've seen, you cannot go back. The mirror will not let you. So tonight, when sleep approaches, pause. Not with fear, not with control, but with reverence. Because when the world fades, and your body softens, and the dream begins, the mirror will rise again. And what it shows, you may shake you. It may haunt you. It may free you. But it will be you. The unspoken, the unfinished, the undeniable. This is the mirror of the sleeper, extra-dimensional drift. Where do your dreams come from? Not in the poetic sense, not in the metaphor of imagination or the soft notion of somewhere in your head. Truly, where are they born? Where is the landscape formed, the language spoken, the faces rendered? We assume it's all internal. We assume the dream world is built from memory, from emotion, from subconscious leftovers stitched into strange narratives. But what if that assumption is incomplete? What if your dreams are not created, but received? What if they're not inside you at all? There is a theory, quiet, strange, and haunting, that suggests something else. That the dreams we experience are not random, nor entirely ours, but echoes. That what we call dreaming is the result of leakage, a drift between dimensions where boundaries thin and signals from parallel worlds seep into our awareness. Extra-dimensional drift. It sounds like science fiction, and maybe it is. But that doesn't mean it isn't also true. Modern physics has long suspected that our universe is not the only one, that beyond what we can see, behind the veil of our four familiar dimensions, length, width, height, and time, exist others, curled tightly, slipping beside us, unreachable by hand, but not necessarily by mind. Dreams, after all, do not obey gravity. They do not follow time. In dreams, you can fall up. You can remember the future. You can become someone else entirely and still feel like yourself. Why? Because in dreams, the laws of this world no longer apply. And maybe that's the point. Maybe what we call a dream is the mind's response to a signal it was never built to fully interpret. A foreign frequency, brushing past your sleeping consciousness. And your brain, confused, unguarded, does its best to make sense of what was never meant for human eyes. You don't dream it into being. You translate it. And what arrives is warped, symbolic, fragmented, but real. That city you've never seen, but always return to. That language you've never learned, but somehow understand. That face you can't name, but know. These might not be products of memory. They might be bleed-throughs, dimensional echoes. Some call them past lives. Others call them shared consciousness. But maybe they are just accidents of proximity. Realities drifting close enough for a moment to touch, to leak, to leave a trace. You feel it in déjà vu. That sudden, sharp certainty that you've lived a moment before. But not here. Not quite. You turn the corner. The air changes. The color of the sky doesn't match what your logic says it should. And your skin whispers, I've been here. Somewhere. Not imagination. Drift. Leakage. There are dreams so strange, so heavy with meaning and emotion, that they seem to arrive from outside the self. And maybe they do. Maybe the brain, in REM sleep, becomes a receiver. Maybe consciousness, when unshackled from ego and language, begins to pick up impressions from parallel scripts, lives we never lived, or are still living, just not here. And what of sleep paralysis, that terrifying state between dream and wake, where the body is frozen and the air is filled with shadow and pressure? Some say it's a brain glitch. Others say it's an ancient fear response. But what if it's the moment of overlap? A split second in which you are half-tuned into another dimension. Your mind sees what your waking world cannot, and your body, stuck between frequencies, cannot decide which world to belong to. It's not a bug. It's a crossing. And the fear is not your own. It's borrowed. The drift is not always gentle. Sometimes it's violent, overwhelming, because you are not prepared to see something your biology was never evolved to interpret. That's why some dreams feel like warnings. That's why some images, impossible ones, stay with you for years. Not because they mean something to you, but because they meant something somewhere else. And you carried the residue across the breach. This drift doesn't ask permission. It doesn't knock. It slips through, quiet, constant. And perhaps that's why dreams are so difficult to recall in the morning, because your waking brain can't find a place for what it saw. The folders don't match. The logic doesn't apply. So it's dismissed, labeled just a dream. But what if that label is wrong? What if just a dream was actually a glimpse into an elsewhere, a world bleeding through the seams of your own? It might explain why some people share the same dream. Strangers. No shared life. No common memory. But the same place. The same being. The same impossible staircase that spirals into silence. Coincidence? Or collision? If the drift is real, then your dreams are not fiction. They're contact. Fragments from other selves, other timelines, other realities, brushing against the veil of your mind. And when the veil thins, something passes through. So tonight, when your eyes grow heavy and your breath softens, Nestead nightmares. You wake in terror, your chest tight, your breath shallow, the room around you dim and unfamiliar. Something feels wrong, but you can't place it. You sit up, reach for the light, and it flickers, then melts. The floor bends, the walls breathe. And in that instant, you realize you're still asleep. You didn't escape the nightmare. You just stepped into another one. This is not a dream. It's a trap. Nested nightmares. A nightmare inside a nightmare, disguised as waking. A false awakening that fools even the sharpest mind because it mimics reality so well, until it doesn't. The door's in the wrong place. The mirror doesn't show your face. The clock ticks backward, and with each layer, your panic grows. Because now, you're not just afraid of what's in the dream. You're afraid you'll never wake up. For those who've lived it, this is not metaphor. It's memory. The phenomenon is well documented across cultures, ages, languages. People waking up into a dream that tells them they've escaped, only to realize the lie when the room twists or a voice speaks without a source. Again and again, one layer after another, until reality itself feels unreliable, like a mask that refuses to come off. Why does this happen? Some say it's neurological, that the brain's reality check system, the part that confirms whether you're awake or asleep, glitches. Stress, trauma, exhaustion. These factors blur the line between sleep stages, causing you to become lucid but unaware. You dream of waking, but your dream self can't tell the difference. So the mind loops, repeats, builds layers, each more fragile than the last. But maybe it's not just science. Maybe it's symbolic. Maybe the dream layers represent something deeper, the layers of the self we've buried, the emotions we've suppressed, the trauma we haven't faced, the shame we won't name. Each false awakening is not just a failure to leave the dream. It's the subconscious saying, "You're not done yet. You haven't seen the real fear. Keep going." And so you do. Against your will, you plunge deeper, and the nightmare shifts. It adapts. It personalizes. Sometimes it becomes your home, slightly wrong. Sometimes it's your job, but you're naked, or voiceless, or lost. Sometimes you're back in a childhood room, and something is whispering behind the door. The terror builds not from monsters or gore, but from familiarity made uncanny. Because the dream doesn't attack you directly, it unsettles you. It makes you doubt the most basic truths: your identity, your safety, your reality. You scream, but no sound comes. You run, but never move. You wake, but you don't. And the longer it lasts, the more your waking self begins to fray. Because when you finally do open your eyes, when you really wake, a question lingers in the silence. How do I know this is real? That's the most terrifying part. Nested nightmares don't just frighten you in sleep. They leave fingerprints on your waking life. The shadow of the dream stays behind. You hesitate before trusting the world again. You look twice at mirrors. You question the ground beneath your feet. Because if the dream can look like waking, what if waking is just another dream? Some mystics believe these nested dreams are not failures, but initiations. That to pass through them is to be tested, not by demons or delusions, but by the self. Each layer stripped away reveals another mask. And only by enduring the descent can you find the truth that waits beneath the final veil. There are those who claim to have broken free by surrendering. not by fighting the nightmare, but by speaking to it, asking questions. Not, how do I wake up? But, why am I still here? And sometimes the dream answers. Not in words, but in symbols. A light, a door, a memory you buried long ago. And with that answer, the real waking begins. Nested nightmares are not meant to punish. They are meant to press, to challenge your illusion of control, to ask, what have you not faced? What have you hidden so deep that even your dreams had to whisper it through 10 layers of lies? And more importantly, are you ready to look? The next time you wake from a nightmare and feel unsure of the bed, the walls, your own breath, don't panic. Don't run. Sit still. Feel the weight of your body. Test your world. Ask gently, is this truth or another mask? And if it is another dream, don't fight. Watch. Learn. Because the nightmare, no matter how many layers it wraps around you, is not your enemy. It's your echo, and it won't stop calling until you answer. Observer. Paradox. You dream of walking down a hallway, long, endless, familiar. You know you've been here before, not in waking life, but in dreams. And then something shifts. You turn around, and you see yourself, not in a mirror, not reflected, watching, just standing there, silent, observing. Who is that? The dream self, the watcher, the version of you who is not doing, not acting, not even reacting, just watching you as you move through the dream. It is one of the strangest phenomena in sleep psychology, and one of the oldest stories in dream folklore. A part of you that is not part of the scene, a witness within the illusion, a presence that should not be. This is the observer paradox. It's not about being seen. It's about being watched by yourself. And the deeper you look, the more unnerving it becomes. Because in dreams, we accept transformation. We accept that we can fly, fall, change bodies, change time. But to witness oneself, as if from outside the body, that breaks something. It triggers a strange awareness that you are not entirely alone in your own dream. But if that's true, then who is dreaming? Who is the real you? Is it the figure walking down the hallway? Or is it the one watching silently from the shadows? Or, and this is where it becomes more disquieting, are you both? This paradox points to a deeper mystery in the structure of consciousness. In waking life, we experience ourselves from the inside. I think, therefore I am. But in dreams, the lines blur. You can become both subject and object, both participant and observer, both the actor and the camera, and sometimes something else entirely. You see yourself from behind. You hear your voice without speaking. You become aware of being aware. And the dream, instead of unfolding like a story, starts feeling more like a surveillance feed. And you don't know who's holding the remote. Some spiritual traditions interpret this as a sign of awakening, the higher self watching the lower self. Others call it astral detachment, or the soul slipping slightly out of alignment. In psychological terms, it might be dissociation, a fracture in the continuity of self. But whatever name we give it, the feeling is always the same. You are being observed by you. And sometimes you cannot move. The observer does not interfere. It does not speak. It simply watches, with a gaze that feels ancient. Sometimes it appears as a version of you from the past. Other times, it's older, a future self, lined with knowledge you don't yet understand. And then there are the rare dreams when the observer is completely still, while you, the dreamer, panic, run, cry, plead. It watches, not with cruelty, but with a stillness that feels beyond judgment, almost divine. It's as if the dream is not for your entertainment or even your healing, but for its understanding. And in those moments, you might ask, am I the dreamer? Or am I the dream? This paradox lives not just in sleep, but in life. There are moments when you step outside of yourself, when you hear your own voice and don't recognize it, when you act and feel like you're watching someone else. When your memory replays an event and it feels more like a movie than a moment you lived, that's the observer. Not gone, just quiet, watching, noticing, waiting. And the truth it holds is difficult. You are not a single self. You are layers, roles, timelines, and behind all of them, beneath the thinking, reacting, performing mind, is something that sees, always sees. This is not a flaw. It is your root, your core, the part of you that does not need identity to exist. The observer is not passive. It is the seat of truth. And in dreams, when the performance ends, when the ego finally sleeps, the observer rises, not to judge, but to witness, not to control, but to remember that you are more than your story. more than your mask, more than your fear. And if you dare to meet that gaze, to look the watcher in the eye, you may not find answers, but you will find clarity. The next time you find yourself being watched in a dream, don't run. Don't panic. Pause. Breathe. Ask, what do you see? And listen, not with ears, with your being. Because what the observer sees is the part of you you've forgotten how to be. Dream signals. Not all dreams are stories. Some are signals. They don't unfold like a narrative. They don't take you on a journey or deliver a vision with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Instead, they arrive like pulses, moments, fragments that flash once, then vanish. A single word, a room with no ceiling, a face that turns just before you recognize it, the silence of someone who should have spoken. You wake unsettled, not terrified, not confused, just moved, as if something reached you, as if something brushed against the part of you that listens without ears. These are dream signals, and they are easy to miss, because they don't announce themselves. They don't scream or linger. They don't demand attention the way nightmares do. They whisper. They flicker. They slip between the folds of thought and hope you're paying attention. But most of the time, we're not. We wait. We dismiss. We forget. Just a dream, we say. But it wasn't. It was a message. And the sender wasn't random. It was you. Or something connected to you. Deeper, older, wiser. Signals come when words won't work. When the soul is trying to say what the mouth never could. When memory fails, when logic collapses, the dream sends a signal instead, a metaphor so sharp, so distilled, that it bypasses intellect and sinks straight into the chest. You don't remember the plot, but you remember the feeling, a feeling like déjà vu, but purer. A sadness with no name, a clarity with no source, a stillness that carries a warning or a hope. Dream signals are not rare. They are constant. But we must relearn how to read them. Because signals are not shaped like language. They are shaped like symbols. The bird that flew into your hands. The phone that wouldn't stop ringing. The doorway you were afraid to enter. These are not just props in your mind's theater. They are codes. And the dream is waiting for you to decode them. Not with analysis, not with charts or books, but with presence, with trust. Because the language of signals is intuitive, ancient, pre-verbal, and you already know it. You were born with it. You spoke it long before you learned to speak. Think of children, the way they describe their dreams with wide eyes and impossible certainty. There was a cloud with teeth, they say. Or, Grandma came and gave me a key. They don't question the absurdity. They feel the meaning, and they carry it with them. But as we age, we lose that fluency. We learn to doubt, to dissect, to dismiss. And the dream signals, once loud, grow quiet. Still, they come, because the subconscious never gives up on reaching you. Sometimes signals arrive before a major change. You dream of bridges, of floods, of broken elevators. Sometimes they arrive after a loss, not to reopen the wound, but to tend to it. You see a door that never opens, a letter you can't read, a voice that says your name from far away. These moments are not empty. They are messages, and even when they make no sense to the waking mind, they make perfect sense to the self beneath. The part of you that knows what? Knows what's breaking, knows what's healing, knows what's coming. Because signals don't predict the future. They prepare you for it. They soften the terrain. They leave breadcrumbs in the dark. And sometimes they save you. There are countless stories of people who dreamed of a stranger's face, only to meet that exact person years later, or dreamed of an illness before any symptoms arose, or received a warning so precise, so undeniable, that they changed course and avoided disaster. Coincidence? Possibly. But perhaps not. Perhaps the dream taps into a web of information larger than the mind, a field of meaning that connects everything. And when that connection stirs, when the frequency lines up, what you receive is not noise, but a signal, something real, something meant for you. So what do you do with it? You pay attention. You write it down. Even the fragments, even the nonsense. Because the dream doesn't speak in grammar. It speaks in resonance. And if something lingers, if it clings to your breath like static in the morning, then it matters. It's saying something. It may not explain itself, but it never comes without purpose. Tonight, when you sleep, ask nothing, expect nothing. But if something arrives, a flash, a whisper, a door, a song, a single word that feels louder than the rest, pause, feel it, hold it. It might be a dream, but it might also be a signal. And some signals only come once. Cyclonic identity. You wake up from a dream, not quite sure who you are. Not because the dream was strange, but because inside it, you were someone else. And not just once. You shifted. You changed. One moment, you were a child hiding in a closet. The next, you were an old man staring at a flood. Then a woman, sprinting barefoot through a city of glass. The dream moved, and with it, so did you. But here's what's strange. It didn't feel wrong. You weren't watching someone else. You were them, completely. And when you woke, the edges of those versions still clung to you, like mist on your skin. For a few seconds, you didn't know which self belonged to this life. You had to re-enter it, piece by piece. Your name, your body, the role you remember playing every day. This is what we call cyclonic identity, the storm of selves. In waking life, we're trained to be one thing, one consistent personality, one story, one coherent arc from childhood to now. We fill forms, sign names, update profiles. We stake our lives on the stability of I. But dreaming doesn't care about consistency. Dreaming dissolves identity like salt in water. And what surfaces is not a single truth, but many. You shift through faces, through voices, through lives. You become stranger and stranger versions of yourself. And each time it happens, the dream doesn't resist. It welcomes it. The story adapts. The world makes room. The identity, your identity, becomes fluid, not broken, expanded. It is the conscious mind that fears this, the part that clings to a name, that needs the ground to stay still, that says, "This is Mekta, and I must stay this way." But the deeper self, the one that rises in dreams, knows better. It knows you are not one self, but many. A collection, a constellation. You are not a single voice. You are a choir. And in the dream, when the ego finally sleeps, the choir sings. Sometimes you are the dreamer. Sometimes you are the dreamed. Sometimes you are the villain, the hero, the bystander, the animal, the wind. You wake up and say, "That was strange." But what if it wasn't strange? What if it was the most honest version of you? Because identity, in its rawest form, is not fixed. It is responsive. It is relational. It grows and sheds and reforms. And dreams reflect that truth without apology. Think of it like this. Each identity you take in a dream is not just a mask. It's a memory, a possibility, a version of self you've suppressed or forgotten or haven't yet dared to live. They rise in sleep because the soul does not care for linear timelines. It moves like weather. It spirals. It returns to the same points again and again, each time from a different angle, a different voice. Cyclonic. That's why, in dreams, you can be both the child and the parent, the wounded and the healer, the seeker and the gate, not because you're confused, but because you are vast. And the dream, that sacred mirror, is showing you all the selves you carry, not to overwhelm, but to remind. You are not limited to the self you perform. You are not stuck in the mask you wear by day. You are all of it. And when you wake from a dream like that, a dream where you kept shifting, pause. Don't rush back into your routine. Sit for a moment in the blur. Let it whisper to you. Ask, who did I become last night? And why? What was that version of me trying to show? What did they feel that I've been avoiding? What did they need that I've been too busy to offer? The answers may not come in words. They may come in a color, in a scent, in a sudden memory from childhood you haven't thought of in years. Follow it. Because cyclonic identity isn't chaos. It's access. Access to the full range of your being. And if you let it, the dream will hand you the keys. One self at a time. Prophetic flickers. There are dreams that feel like memories of something that hasn't happened yet. They come quietly, without thunder, without announcement. Just a flicker. A moment so precise, so familiar, that when you wake, it stays. Not because it was strange, but because it felt real. And days, weeks, sometimes even years later, you live it, exactly as it was. You turn a corner and recognize the sky. You open a letter and remember the handwriting before you've seen it. You hear someone laugh, and your skin tightens, not because you're remembering a memory, but because the moment has already passed through you. Once before. These are prophetic flickers, not grand visions, not cinematic forecasts of the future, but subtle intrusions, echoes of time, bending. And when they come, they leave behind a question that's hard to shake. How did I dream something that hadn't happened yet? We're taught to believe time moves forward, a straight line, from birth to death, from cause to effect. But dreams don't obey this rule. They skip. They spiral. They stitch past and future together with no effort at all. In dreams, you can remember what never happened. You can see what hasn't come. And none of it feels strange until you wake. Then the doubt sets in. You dismiss it. Coincidence, you say. Déjà vu. Your brain playing tricks. But still, the feeling won't let go. Because there was something in that moment, a familiarity so sharp it felt invasive, like you were living inside a copy of yourself, not the original. You were here once, weren't you? Science calls it pattern recognition, a misfiring of neural loops. Your brain predicting a future it's already halfway constructed. And maybe that's true. Maybe your mind is that powerful. Maybe it's always running simulations, and sometimes it gets one exactly right. But what if it's more than that? What if time, in dreams, is not linear? What if your dreaming self moves differently, like a swimmer in a current that loops back on itself? And what you experience as a flicker is a crossing, not a prediction, a visitation. There are cultures that never doubted this. Indigenous traditions across the world have treated dreams as prophetic for centuries, not as superstition, but as survival. A dream of danger wasn't a metaphor. It was a warning. A dream of water, of storm, of migration. It meant something. And often it came true. The dreamer was not special. The dreamer was tuned in, open, listening. And that's what the modern mind struggles with. We want proof, a record, a logic we can track and name. But the prophetic flicker doesn't obey the mind. It obeys the soul. And the soul doesn't measure time in hours. It feels it. Prophetic dreams don't come on command. They arrive when something shifts, when you're quiet, when your defenses are low, when your body sleeps, but something else wakes. And often, the flicker is not about you. It's about someone you haven't met, a place you haven't seen, a grief you haven't yet earned. And the dream gives it to you early, not to torment, but to prepare. So when it comes, you're not destroyed. You're ready. Or, at least less broken than you might have been. This is not magic. It's memory, from a different angle. And once you've felt it, you start to notice the signs. You wake from a dream and write it down. Not because it made sense, but because it had weight. Because something in your chest said, "This matters." Weeks later, it returns. And when it does, you remember, not just the image, but the truth behind it, the recognition that this was always coming. And for one fragile moment, the timeline folds, and you are both the dreamer, and the dreamed, the one who saw and the one who sees. Prophetic flickers are not about control. They're about attention. They ask you to slow down, to watch for the moments that feel louder than they should, to honor the patterns you can't explain, because the soul is always whispering, and sometimes it whispers forward. So tonight, if your dream feels too clear, if it lingers too long, if it shows you something ordinary in a way that feels extraordinary, don't dismiss it. Write it, hold it. Because one day, maybe soon, maybe years from now, life may hand you that moment again. And when it does, you'll remember. Not because the dream was a warning, but because it was a gift. Dream loops. It begins the same way every time. A hallway, a voice, a light turning off. You run, you fall, you wake, but not really, because the moment you open your eyes, it begins again. The hallway, the voice, the light, the fall. You are trapped inside a cycle, a dream that eats its own tail. This is the dream loop, not a metaphor, not an expression of boredom or repetition. A literal loop. You dream the same dream, again and again, night after night. Sometimes with small changes, sometimes exactly the same. And the more it repeats, the deeper the unease grows, because it feels like the dream is trying to get it right, or trying to get you to notice. Dream loops are not like ordinary dreams. They don't drift or unravel. They are structured, tight, precise, and they have a rhythm that feels intentional, as if something is rehearsing. But what? Maybe it's you. Maybe the subconscious is returning to the same place, the same image, the same encounter, because something there remains unfinished. A trauma, a fear, a decision never made, a truth never faced. The dream becomes a loop because you've walked away from the thing you were meant to stand in front of. And the psyche, patient, persistent, won't let go. It replays the moment, not to punish you, but to say, look again. Then there's the stranger version of the loop, the one where it all seems normal, until you realize you've dreamed this before. And not just once, 12 times, 100. But each time you forgot, until now. The sensation of suddenly knowing you've been here before, not in waking life, but in the dream, is like a key turning in a lock you didn't know existed. And when that lock opens, the loop tightens. You try to change things. Say a different word. Turn left instead of right. But the dream adapts. the loop shifts and resets. Sometimes it ends abruptly. Sometimes it keeps you for hours. But always, it returns. And the question lingers. What am I not seeing? Some researchers say dream loops are the result of memory glitches, the brain short-circuiting as it tries to process intense emotional experiences. But others suggest something more symbolic, that the loop is a spiral, not a circle, that it returns to the same point not to trap you, but to deepen your understanding. You don't repeat the dream. You descend into it, layer by layer. And eventually, you reach the core. That moment, that symbol, that face you kept avoiding, and when you finally look, truly look, the loop ends. Not always with relief, sometimes with grief, but also with release. Dream loops can also occur in a single night. You dream, you wake. You go through your morning routine. You make coffee. Then something's off. The clock is melting. The mirror breathes. You realize, still dreaming. You wake again. Same room, same light, same steps. But wrong. You're not awake. Again. And again. Each layer feeling thinner, more fragile, until reality itself becomes uncertain. These false awakenings are a kind of loop, a recursive trap that challenges your very sense of truth. You begin to ask, how would I know if this were real? And the dream offers no answer, because that's the test. The loop is not just about repetition. It's about attention, about awareness, about presence. It asks, are you awake yet? Not in body, in consciousness. And if you aren't, if you keep running the pattern without pausing, without questioning, then the loop holds. But if you do pause, if you ask the right question, the loop can shatter. And what lies beyond it is not always comfort, but it is truth, the self behind the habit, the pain behind the repetition, the light behind the door you never opened. So the next time you wake into the same dream, the same moment, the same words echoing down a corridor that never ends, don't run. Don't force your way out. Stand still. Ask, why am I back here? And listen, because loops are not prisons. They are invitations to look again, to feel what you wouldn't feel, to say what you couldn't say, to remember what you buried, until the dream dug it up again and held it before you like a mirror, saying, you will not move forward until you understand. Not everything in dreams wants to be escaped. Some things want to be completed. lucid flame. There is a moment in some dreams when something clicks. The street bends the wrong way. The sun is too close. You speak a language you've never heard. And you realize this is a dream, not metaphorically, not philosophically, literally. You become aware that you are inside the dream, and something ignites. The lucid flame. It's not fire, not heat, not light you can see. It's a kind of awareness, a brightness behind the eyes, a strange energy that surges through the body of the dream self and awakens a question that can only be asked from inside. What if I don't have to follow the script? Lucid dreaming begins here, not with control, but with realization. A moment of clarity inside illusion. A flash of consciousness in the middle of the subconscious. It doesn't always last. Sometimes the flame flickers and dies, but when it stays, the dream changes. Because now, you're no longer just the dreamer. You are the witness, the participant, the God. For many, the first instinct is flight. Literally. To rise above the ground, feel the wind, bend the world to will. To walk through walls. To summon impossible things. To explore the dream, not as a victim, but as a creator. And it is thrilling. But beneath the thrill, something deeper burns. Because the lucid flame doesn't just give you power. It offers you access. Access to the unfiltered truth of the self. To memories buried beneath memory. To fears that wear different masks. To longings you've never spoken. In a lucid dream, you can ask the question that would terrify you in waking life. And sometimes, the dream answers. Not in words, but in symbols. A door opens. A figure appears. A version of you stands across from you and doesn't speak. But you understand anyway. The lucid flame illuminates not just the dream, but the dreamer. It shows you the architecture of your own subconscious. And more than that, it gives you agency. You can ask to be shown something. You can choose to confront what you've always avoided. You can call out to the dream itself, and something may answer. Not always gently, because power comes with responsibility. Lucid dreams are not toys. They are thresholds. And once you cross, you are no longer an innocent traveler. You are in the realm of mirrors, and every choice reflects something back. Some use the lucid flame to escape, to build dream worlds so pleasant they forget what they came for. But others use it to explore, to dive deeper, to find the source of the loop, to look the nightmare in the face, to ask the dream, What are you hiding from me? And that is when the real flame ignites. Because lucidity is not about control. It's about courage. The courage to stay awake inside yourself, to stop running, to turn toward what frightens you, to meet the shadow with your eyes open. And when you do, the dream changes again, not in form, in meaning. The nightmare softens. The monster steps back. The fire becomes light, not because you conquered it, but because you saw it, truly saw it. And that was enough. The lucid flame is not rare. It visits more people than we realize, but few remember it. Fewer still train it. Like any flame, it needs fuel. It needs breath. It needs attention. And it needs permission. If you want to find it again, don't force it. Invite it. Set the intention before sleep. If I dream, I wish to know, not to dominate, but to witness, because the greatest gift of lucidity is not flying, it's seeing the self that sleeps behind the self, seeing the architecture of fear and beauty that lives in your private cathedral of symbols, and standing there, inside the illusion, with your eyes open. That is holy. So tonight, if you find yourself dreaming, and something feels off, pause. Look around. Ask gently, am I awake? And if the dream answers no, breathe in. Feel the light rise, because the flame has found you. And now, you are not lost. You are aware. You are lucid. You are free. Dream archives. Some dreams don't feel new. You enter them, and there's a familiarity you can't explain. The hallway knows your footsteps. The sky bends in the same toned way. The people don't have names, but they greet you like someone they've always known. You're not visiting the dream. You're returning to it. And somewhere in that returning, a strange question takes root. Where is this place? Because it isn't imagination. Not exactly. It has architecture, continuity, rules. It remembers you. These are not just dreams. They are archives, stored spaces in the subconscious, or perhaps beyond it, where pieces of memory, emotion, thought, and spirit gather and wait. Not randomly, not chaotically, but with strange, intricate order. Some people call them memory palaces. Others speak of them as astral libraries, spiritual repositories, or inner temples. But whatever name we give, the feeling is the same. This place holds something important, and not just for the dreamer, for the self beneath. Because the dream archives are not built in a night. They are assembled slowly, over years, maybe lifetimes. Each recurring element, each symbol that returns across dreams, becomes a stone in the foundation, a door, a corridor, a room. Over time, the structure forms, and you begin to recognize it. You say, "I've been here before. Not once. Many times. Maybe it's a forest with no end. Maybe it's a city beneath the sea. Maybe it's a childhood home, but not quite as it was. Maybe it's a tower, a library, a cathedral. And every time you return, something has shifted. A new book on the shelf, a light turned on, a figure waiting at the edge of vision. These are not dreams like stories. They are dreams like maps. And the archive is alive. It grows with you. It stores not just memories, but patterns, questions you've asked again and again, fears you've fed, hopes you've hidden. It collects them, not to haunt, but to hold. Because the mind forgets. But the archive remembers. There are theories, both ancient and modern, that the subconscious holds a kind of spatial intelligence, that it organizes emotion not as data, but as terrain, that you literally walk through your own inner world when you dream. And some say the archive goes even deeper, that what you build in your own dreams might connect to what others build in theirs, a collective space, a shared structure. Some call it the Akashic field, some call it the mythic layer, but maybe it's simply the truth that no memory is truly private, and that our dreams, in their quiet brilliance, overlap more than we know. You might find yourself dreaming of a place you've never been, and someone else in another city has dreamt the same place. Not similar, identical, the same bridge, the same sky, the same absence of time. And when you speak of it, there's no explanation, only recognition. Because the archive doesn't need explanation. It needs presence. It needs you to return again and again, and pay attention to what changes, to who appears, to what has been added or removed. Because sometimes the dream is not trying to tell you something. Sometimes it's storing something for you, a truth too sharp to face in waking life, a wound too tender, a memory not yet ready to emerge. And the dream holds it, not out of cruelty, out of care, out of trust. The archive is not a vault. It's a sanctuary, a space within the dream world where your psyche keeps what matters most, even when you've forgotten it, even when you're not ready. So if you find yourself dreaming of the same place again and again, don't dismiss it. Ask, what is this place? What do I leave here? What do I retrieve? You might not get an answer in words, but you'll feel it, the shift, the key, the echo of something sacred. And when you wake, carry that feeling with you, because the archive isn't gone. It never was. It waits for you every night, behind the veil, beneath the noise, ready. Forgotten selves. Not every part of you made it into this life. There were pieces left behind, choices never made, paths never walked, selves that once breathed in the imagination, then quietly faded. Not from failure, not from weakness, but from the simple momentum of living. Because as you grow, the world asks for clarity. It wants definition, a single name, a role, a clean, consistent story. And so you begin to choose. And with each choice, something else goes quiet, not erased, just forgotten. But nothing truly disappears in the mind, especially not a self. And dreams, remember. You wake in the middle of the night, your heart beating faster than the dream warrants. A face you don't know, but ache for. A voice you've never heard, but mourn. A version of you, younger or older, or simply other, standing at the edge of some silent landscape. And you feel it. That was me. Somehow. Somewhere. For a moment, it's overwhelming. Not terrifying, but tender. Like looking at a childhood photo of someone you used to be. Someone who didn't survive. Not in body, in story. These are the forgotten selves. Dreams do not resurrect them. They never died. They've simply waited. In the folds of memory, in the back rooms of the psyche, in the archives of the soul. For the moment you'd slow down long enough to hear them. They show up in dreams, not as ghosts, but as invitations. An artist you never became. A language you never learned. A passion you buried. A gentleness you hardened. A life that could have been yours. If the wind had shifted one breath to the left, and the dream lets you live it, just for a night. You wake and think, that wasn't me. But it was. It still is. Because identity is not a single thread. It's a tapestry, and many of its colors have been tucked away. The world is fast to erase what doesn't serve the moment. But dreams are patient. They hold the pieces of you you've forgotten how to name. And sometimes they bring them back, not to confuse you, to heal you, to remind you that even the paths not taken leave footprints, that even the selves you left behind still whisper your name. And they are not bitter. They do not blame you for the turns you made. They simply want to be remembered, to be seen, to be felt one last time in the quiet dark of sleep, where time bends and permission returns. You may not understand the emotion when you wake. You might feel out of place or mournful or strangely at peace. Not because the dream made sense, but because a piece of you, long silent, finally spoke. And you listened. These selves aren't mistakes. They're possibilities. And honoring them does not undo who you are. It expands it. So the next time a dream leaves you with a face you can't place, a scene that never happened, a grief that doesn't belong to your story, don't rush to forget. Write it down. Name it. Even if that name is only mais, once. Because inside you still live versions of yourself that shaped you. even in silence. And the more you welcome them, the more whole you become, not by going back, but by remembering forward. Emotional echoes. You don't always remember the dream, but you remember how it felt. You wake with your chest tight, or warm, or heavy with something you can't name. The images are already fading, but the emotion lingers, stubborn, raw, precise. This is the emotional echo, a residue of feeling that outlasts the dream itself. Not a memory, not a metaphor, a sensation. And sometimes it's louder than anything you felt all day. You might spend an entire afternoon walking through life just a few inches off center, distracted, disoriented, overwhelmed by a sadness that doesn't belong to anything you can explain, or a joy so deep it makes you quiet, or a fear that has no visible cause. This isn't mood, it's echo. Dreams, after all, are not just stories. They are emotional landscapes, constructed from memory, longing, instinct, and intuition. And sometimes they speak not in words or images, but in feeling. A door you couldn't open, a look from someone you don't recognize, but trust completely. The silence of an empty room that somehow holds both comfort and despair. These things don't always translate into thought. They bypass the intellect. They settle directly into the nervous system, like a tuning fork struck in the chest. And they reverberate, sometimes for hours, sometimes for years. You may not remember the dream itself, but its feeling returns in moments of quiet. When you walk alone at dusk, when you hold a cup in both hands, when a particular song passes through you like light through a stained window, and something stirs. You don't know why. You just feel it. That's the echo, a kind of internal archaeology. The dream buries emotion where memory can't reach, and then time or experience or some unknown key unlocks it. And suddenly you're weeping, or smiling, or breathless with the sharp, holy feeling that you've just remembered something you never lived. That is the strange power of dream emotions. They do not play by the rules of cause and effect. They arrive fully formed, uninvited, undeniable. They show you what the waking self tries to avoid. A grief not yet grieved, a love not yet felt, a regret not yet spoken, a truth not yet accepted. The dream carries it for you until you're ready, and sometimes even when you're not. People often ask, "Why did I feel so much in that dream?" Or, Why did I wake up crying when nothing bad happened? Because the emotional body knows what the conscious mind denies. And dreams do not respect your denial. They speak the language of truth, not logic, not timelines, just feeling. They are unfiltered echoes of what your heart already knows, but hasn't yet found the words to say. And that's why they haunt. Not because they hurt, but because they matter. Because somewhere inside you, a door was opened, and what passed through refused to leave quietly. So how do you handle it? You don't suppress. You don't distract. You sit. You breathe. You listen. You say, I don't remember the dream, but I feel what it gave me. And that is enough. Because feeling is memory. Feeling is message. Feeling is proof that something sacred passed through you. So tonight, when you wake with a weight in your chest, or a strange calm, or an ache that comes from nowhere, honor it, not with explanation, with space. Let it echo. Let it move through the day without needing to name it. Because not all dreams speak in images. Some only speak in feeling. And feeling is more than enough. Night theater. Each night, without invitation, it begins. The curtain lifts, the stage appears, and the roles are cast, often without your knowing. You become a stranger, a lover, a ghost, a victim, a god. You move through scenes that make no sense. You speak lines you never wrote. You feel emotions you don't understand. And you wake before the story ends. This is the night theater, the stage of the subconscious, the silent performance that unfolds behind your eyes while your body lies still. A place where logic bends, symbols speak, and time forgets itself. But don't be fooled by the surrealism. This is not random. The dream is a production. And something in you, some director behind the curtain, is choosing the set, the actors, the mood, the storm, even if you don't know why. The dream is not just a story. It's a dramatization, an expression of something that cannot be said plainly. Because some truths are too heavy for the tongue, too sharp for daylight, too sacred for words. So the psyche dresses them in metaphor and lets them play. You might dream of walking through a house with no doors, or speaking to someone who never looks up, or running toward a child who always disappears just before you reach them. You wake confused, but the dream wasn't confusing. It was clear, clear in a way only your heart understands. The dream was showing you, not telling you. The night theater is not here to explain. It's here to express, just like real theater. It makes you feel first and understand later, sometimes much later. The mistake we make is trying to analyze too soon. We wake up and ask, what did it mean? But the better question is, what did it stir? Because the dream is not a puzzle to be solved. It's a mirror held at an angle, one you can only glimpse through feeling. And the actors on that stage, they're all you. Every figure, every voice, every enemy or ally, they're expressions of your own inner world. The friend who betrayed you, your disappointment. The stranger who led you through fire, your courage. The child locked in a room, your innocence waiting. Each role a fragment, each scene a confession, each symbol a sentence in a language only dreams speak fluently. The theater is ancient. Humans have always dreamed, always staged their inner lives in sleep, always told stories in the dark, myths, visions, revelations. This is not new. It is the oldest art form, and you are both the playwright and the audience. So what do you do when the dream ends? When the lights dim and you wake without a script? You sit in the stillness. You remember the stage, the tone, the silence between scenes. You carry it like you would a poem, not reciting, but feeling, because the dream didn't ask you to explain it. It asked you to remember it, to let the performance linger in your bones, because somewhere in that surreal, shifting world, you saw yourself, not the version with a job or a name or a schedule, the real one, the wordless one. And even if you forget the lines, the truth remains, waiting, night after night, behind the curtain. Dreams do not speak in sentences. They speak in symbols. They do not tell. They show. A black bird perched on your shoulder. A hallway with no end. A mouth full of broken glass. These are not metaphors meant to be decoded with logic. They are experiences, wrapped in sensation, delivered without permission. And yet, when we wake, we try to make them behave. We break them down, assign meaning, create charts and indexes. We say, water means emotion, teeth mean anxiety, flying means escape. But the truth is rarely so fixed, because symbols are not universal. They are intimate. They draw from your life, your fears, your language, your memories. A snake to one person is transformation. To another, it's betrayal. To someone else, it's sacred. So when the dream hands you a symbol, it is not giving you a puzzle. It is giving you a mirror, not to explain yourself, but to feel yourself. Symbols are emotional coordinates. They drop you into a moment so full of sensation that you don't need context to understand it. You know it in your breath, in your chest, in the way your hands move when you try to describe it. Symbol logic is not about translation. It's about attention, about how a single image placed in the landscape of your dream can hold more weight than an entire conversation. You don't need to know why the lion stood at the door. You need to ask what it felt like. Were you afraid? Curious? Were you drawn to it? Or did you turn away? Because that response, that feeling, is the meaning. The symbol is the container. The emotion is the message. And most of the time, your body already knows what it means long before your mind can catch up. Dreams use symbols because the soul does not speak English. It speaks in impressions, in light and shadow, in movement and stillness. It cannot tell you, you are avoiding something. So it shows you a burning house with your name on the mailbox. It cannot say, you have outgrown your life. So it shows you trying to wear shoes that don't fit. The logic of symbols is not logical. It is layered, non-linear. It loops and folds and hides inside itself. But it is consistent. When a symbol returns in multiple dreams, it's not coincidence. It's emphasis. A message replayed until you're ready to receive it. Some symbols are archetypal, so ancient they appear across cultures. The labyrinth, the mirror, the river, the tower. These forms seem to rise from something deeper than individual memory, as if the human mind carries a blueprint of meaning passed down through centuries of dreaming. But even these symbols are not fixed. The river might be birth to one person, death to another, and to a third. Simply time. That is why dream interpretation can never be a textbook. It must be a conversation with the self, with the soul, with the subtle undercurrent of your emotional life. To understand your dreams, you don't need to decode them like math. You need to sit with them. Ask what lingers, what refuses to fade, what image still floats behind your eyes at lunch. The dream already spoke. Your job is to feel what was said. And if a symbol comes back again, weeks later, months, years, do not ask, why is this back? Ask, what have I still not felt? because symbols wait, not for analysis, for honesty. Bloodline. Dreams. Sometimes you dream things that feel older than you. Places you've never been. Struggles you've never lived. Faces you've never seen, but recognize in a way that bypasses the mind and goes straight to the marrow. These dreams carry a strange weight. They don't feel like memory. They feel like inheritance, as if something ancient moved through you, used your sleep as a passage to echo its voice once more. These are bloodline dreams, dreams that don't belong to your personal experience, but to your lineage. You may never meet the ancestors whose memories you carry, but they are there, not as ghosts or legends, but as stored experiences in your DNA, waiting for the moment you're still enough, open enough to feel them. Science has only recently begun to explore the idea that trauma can be passed down biologically, that events lived generations ago can alter gene expression and be inherited like eye color or bone structure. But before the research, before the terminology, the dreamers already knew. They felt it in their sleep. They saw images they couldn't explain, wars they never fought, famines they never endured, children they never lost. And still they wept, not because they understood, but because the body did. The body remembered. The dream served as a bridge between past and present, between silence and witness. Sometimes bloodline dreams come as nightmares. You dream of running from soldiers, of hiding in cellars, of being silenced. The fear is overwhelming. And yet, when you wake, there's no corresponding event in your life, no reason for such terror, no context. But that's the point. These dreams don't come from context. They come from transmission, from the stories no one told, from the secrets buried not in language, but in blood. Other times, these dreams are not terrifying. They are sacred. You meet a grandmother who died before you were born. She smiles, touches your face, and says your name, correctly, completely, with a tenderness that feels older than time. Or you walk into a village that no longer exists, and everyone there greets you like you've returned from exile. You wake and feel homesick, but not for a place in this world. For a place your ancestors once knew. For a home your body remembers, even when your mind does not. Bloodline dreams are not hallucinations. They are echoes. They are transmissions from the hidden archive of your ancestry, showing you what was carried and what must be carried no longer. You may dream of sorrow, but the dream is not asking you to relive it. It's asking you to release it, to hold it long enough for it to finally let go. Because inherited trauma can live in the body for generations. But in dreaming, it can rise. It can be seen. And once seen, it can begin to heal. This is why, in many cultures, dreaming is not private. It is communal. A dream is shared not for curiosity, but for meaning. It is offered to the group as a sign, as a whisper from the ancestors, asking to be heard. And the community listens. They honor what is spoken because they know the dream is not just about the dreamer. It's about the thread, the lineage, the deeper intelligence moving through all of them. In the modern world, we forget this. We isolate our dreams. We treat them as psychological events, personal phenomena. But some dreams do not come from within. They rise from behind, from those who walked before you, from the voices that shaped your family long before you were born. And they don't come for no reason. They come when something is ready to shift. So when a dream arrives that feels too heavy, too specific, too old to be yours, pause. Ask yourself, is this mine, or was it given? And if it was given, what does it ask? To be seen, to be spoken, to be transformed. You do not need to know the names of those who came before you to carry their memory. You only need to feel the weight when it visits and honor it. Because sometimes a dream is not about you. Sometimes it's about what you were chosen to heal. Dream visitors. Not every presence in your dream is a creation of your own mind. Sometimes someone arrives, unexpected, unfamiliar, and yet undeniably real. They do not behave like other dream characters. They don't dissolve when you wake. They don't follow the script of your subconscious. Instead, they look you in the eye. They speak with weight. Their words echo after the dream ends, as if they weren't invented, but delivered. These are dream visitors. They are not always people you know. In fact, most of the time, they're not. A woman you've never seen, but whose face you trust immediately. A child who says your name without being taught. An old man with no eyes who sits beside your bed and tells you something you never told anyone. These moments are strange, not because they're dramatic, but because they feel realer than the dream that holds them. The texture of the moment shifts. The air gets denser. Time slows. And when they speak, it doesn't sound like your mind talking to itself. It sounds like someone else entirely. The question that follows is inevitable. Who was that? The skeptic might say, just another dream figure. Your brain playing dress up. But part of you knows better. You can feel the difference. Most dream figures are fluid. They morph. They serve the landscape. But visitors are specific. They have gravity. You remember them more clearly than people you've met in waking life. You remember their voice, the way they held their hands, the expression they wore when they turned to leave. Some dream visitors arrive with a message, a warning, a truth. Others say nothing at all, yet their presence lingers like smoke in the soul. You wake up altered, not because you understood them, but because they saw something in you. They met you in a way that few people ever do, without performance, without time, without any reason except to be there. There are stories, countless ones, of people who've dreamt of deceased loved ones, long after grief has faded, or sometimes long before the loss occurred. They say things that bring peace, or closure, or simply show up to sit in silence. And when the dreamer wakes, the room feels different. The air feels touched. The day begins with a softness that can't be explained. Were they really there? The mind can't say. But the heart often answers yes. Other dream visitors are strangers, but with a strange urgency. They tell you something cryptic or familiar. They may say your name or share a memory that doesn't belong to either of you. And when you try to explain it to someone else, it doesn't translate. Because the moment wasn't about the message. It was about the presence, the meeting, the reminder that something outside of you still knows your name. In some traditions, dream visitors are guides, ancestors, spirits, teachers. They appear when you're on the edge of a threshold, when something in your life is about to shift. They don't offer instruction. They offer witness. They show up so you know you're not alone in this part. Even in sleep, even in the quietest corner of yourself, someone walks beside you. Not all visitors are kind. Some arrive as challengers. They unsettle you. Not with cruelty, but with disruption. They say the thing you won't admit. They show you the part of yourself you've hidden. They don't punish. They reveal. And that kind of presence can feel like violence when you're not ready. But later, you remember them not with fear, but with clarity. They were the one who told the truth. And then there are visitors who return. You see them in multiple dreams, sometimes over years. They don't age. They don't explain. They're just there, watching, waiting, standing at the edge of the dream as if guarding something. You begin to feel as if they're tracking your inner world more closely than you are. And you start to wonder, if I return here enough, will I remember who they are? Because maybe you already knew them. Maybe they're part of you, exiled long ago. Or maybe they are what Jung called the self, capital S, the totality of you, arriving in pieces until you are whole enough to receive the rest. You don't need to know what they are to honor them. You just need to listen when they come. So if someone appears in your dream tonight, and you wake with the feeling that they didn't belong to the dream, but stepped into it, don't dismiss it. Sit with their name, their shape, their silence. They may not return, or they may never have left. Dream within you. Wake from the dream, only to find yourself still dreaming. The room looks familiar. The light falls the same way across the floor. Your body feels heavy, real, but something is off. The air doesn't move quite right. The silence is too complete. Then, suddenly, a detail shatters the illusion. Your reflection doesn't follow your movement, or a clock melts slowly against the wall. In that moment, a ripple passes through you. You're not awake. You only dreamed that you were. This is the dream within, a layered state where your mind builds illusions of awakening, traps within traps, and narratives that fold into themselves like origami soaked in rain. You don't know how many layers deep you are. You just know something isn't holding. And the more you try to wake, the more you descend. It is not always frightening at first. Sometimes the false awakening is mundane. You get out of bed, brush your teeth, begin your day, but it's all off kilter, slightly out of sync, like an echo playing before the original sound. You begin to suspect that waking is no longer trustworthy. You begin to wonder, if I can dream that I'm waking, how do I ever know when I'm truly awake? This is not just a dream trick. It's a philosophical fracture. The dream within breaks your certainty that consciousness has a clear boundary. It introduces the possibility that awareness can exist in layers, each one believing itself to be the top, the real, the truth. But when that boundary blurs, when your mind steps out of one dream into another, and another again, you are forced to confront something more unsettling. Maybe reality is recursive. Maybe the self is not singular. There are people who dream like this often. They wake 3, 4, even 5 times before actually returning to the physical world. And by the final waking, there's no relief, only disorientation. The world feels thin, light feels artificial, and for the rest of the day, a single question hums quietly beneath every breath. What if I'm still dreaming? And who could blame you for asking? Because in these moments, the dream doesn't feel like a story. It feels like a system, a design, a fractal you're falling through, each layer containing echoes of the last, familiar walls, familiar fears, the same door, the same silence behind it. Sometimes the dream within becomes a trap. You scream for help, but your voice doesn't rise. You open your eyes and see your room, but cannot move. You're awake, but not awake enough. And fear swells not because of monsters or symbols, but because of paralysis, because the self you thought was solid has dissolved again. And yet, some seek this state. Lucid dreamers who learn to use the dream within as a portal, a passage between states. They let each layer strip away another mask. They use the false awakenings not as confusion, but as clues. If I'm still dreaming, then there's still something I haven't seen. They go deeper, and at the core of the descent, they sometimes find something that can't be explained, only felt. The deepest layer is rarely visual. It is quiet, dim, a sensation more than a scene. You float, you fall, you become the dream itself. There are no words here, only knowing. And when you return, finally, to waking life, you don't tell anyone. Not because you're unsure, but because language doesn't reach that deep. The dream within is not a glitch. It is a mirror of your mind's architecture. It shows you how easily the brain can be convinced, how willingly the self walks through illusion. But it also shows you something more empowering, that reality is not binary. It is layered. That awareness can expand. That waking is not a switch. It's a scale. So the next time you wake inside a dream, and then wake again and again, don't rush to escape. Add why the dream is keeping you. Ask what it wants you to notice that you keep missing. And when you finally open your eyes for real, sit for a while before standing up. Let the air settle. Let the silence speak. Because sometimes the most important thing a dream can teach you is that reality, too, has its illusions. Whispered warnings. Not all warnings come in thunder. Some arrive like a whisper in the dark. A glance, a gesture, a subtle distortion in the air of your dream that leaves you uneasy, even when nothing visibly threatens you. You don't wake screaming. you wake still, and certain that something in the dream was trying to say, "Be careful." These are whispered warnings. Dreams that don't deliver their message in catastrophe, but in silence, in strange details, in things that almost make sense. A door that won't close, a phone that rings but can't be answered, a figure that keeps its back turned even when you call its name. You wake and don't know what happened, but you know something was said. The message rarely arrives in language. Words can be forgotten. Emotions can't. A whispered warning clings to your skin, your breath, your pulse. It turns up hours later when you hesitate for no reason, when you cancel a plan and don't explain why. When you leave 5 minutes later than you meant to, and something unfolds differently because of it. We are taught to dismiss such things, to trust only what can be proven. But not everything true can be measured. Some things are only felt, and dreams are fluent in that language. They speak in mood, in movement, in timing. A warning doesn't always tell you what will happen. It only tells you that something is shifting, that a path is narrowing, that attention is required. It's not fear, it's alertness. Something in you, the deeper part, the ancient part, has picked up a change in the air. And the dream, in its quiet compassion, has wrapped that feeling into an image you can carry. The problem is, we rarely listen, because the dream doesn't sound like instruction. It sounds like nonsense. But what if the nonsense is coded? What if the fragments are fragments only to the rational mind, and to the emotional body they are already clear? A friend once dreamed of standing on a subway platform where every sign was blank. No trains arrived. Everyone waiting wore the same expression, hollow, expectant. Days later, she walked into a boardroom and felt the exact same air. Not the look of the room, the feeling. And she knew she was in the wrong place. The dream hadn't told her where to go. It had told her what stillness felt like when it meant danger, what waiting looked like when nothing was coming. It had shown her the shape of inertia. Other warnings are more direct. You dream of a voice calling your name from across water. You turn, but see no one. You wake with your chest tight, as though you were already mid-sentence when the dream ended. And for the rest of the day, every wave of silence feels like a message you were meant to finish reading. But not all warnings are about external events. Some are internal, a signal that you are not aligned with yourself, that something in your behavior, your pace, your direction, is pulling you away from your center. The dream doesn't say "sta." It says, "Look." And it says it through a mirror that won't show your face, or a journal in your hand where all the pages are blank, or a stairwell that leads you in circles. And the body remembers. It carries the unfinished message. And all day you feel like something's missing. Not a task, a truth, something just out of reach. The dream has already said it. Now it waits, not to repeat itself, but to be honored. You don't need to understand it to respond to it. You only need to trust that if something echoes through your body like a bell struck lightly, again and again, then it was not an accident. And if you find yourself standing in waking life at the edge of something, unsure, check for the echo. Not in your mind, in your breath. Does this moment feel like the dream? If it does, then pause. Because warnings are not punishments. They are kindness, the soul's way of preparing you for what can't be prevented, but can be met with grace. Dreams don't save us from pain, but they can point us toward readiness. And sometimes that readiness begins with a whisper. Collective mind. There are dreams that don't feel like yours, not because they're impersonal, but because they're too large. They carry a weight that feels inherited, shared, like they've passed through countless minds before reaching you. You dream of floods that have no end, cities that shimmer and vanish, strangers whose eyes hold the weight of something ancient and collective. And when you wake, there's a quiet certainty in your chest. This dream didn't start with me. This is the experience of the collective mind, the sense that some dreams don't emerge from your isolated self, but from something deeper, older, shared. A field of thought and memory that connects us beneath our stories, beneath our languages, beneath even our biology. You weren't told to believe in it, but you felt it. In the dream that echoes a myth you never learned. In the image that feels like history, even though you've never lived it. In the moment when you meet someone who has had the same dream. Down to the landscape, the sequence, the sorrow. Modern science barely has language for this. But ancient cultures did. They spoke of dream time, of ancestral memory, of spirits that walk through the night carrying stories from one soul to another. Carl Jung gave it a name, the collective unconscious, a layer of the psyche that contains archetypes, symbols, and truths that belong not to the individual, but to humanity itself. A shared blueprint, a mythic ocean. And our dreams are the boats drifting on its surface. In this space, you are not alone. You dream, but your dream is connected to every other dream that ever held that same shape. The woman running through a burning forest. The child reaching for a light in a room full of silence. The tower that rises endlessly into a sky filled with stars that look like eyes. These are not just your creations. They are echoes, patterns, signals sent across generations of dreaming. And it explains something subtle, the feeling that some dreams already knew you, that the world you entered had been waiting for you, that its rules were already written, not by your mind, but by many. Dreams like this often bring symbols that don't match your life. You've never been to that mountain, but you know its paths. You've never worn that uniform, but it fits too well. You speak a language that doesn't exist, but you understand every word. You are participating in something vast, not fiction, not fantasy, but memory without owner. You are dreaming the dream of the species. Some people resist this idea. They want their dreams to be private, psychological, clean. But the dream world doesn't obey that kind of boundary. It leaks. It entangles. It reaches into you and pulls out not just your fears and your wishes, but the ones your ancestors carried, the ones your culture avoided, the ones your body still remembers, even if your mind never learned their names. This is why certain dream symbols appear across civilizations, without contact, without explanation. The flood, the serpent, the child with burning eyes, the descent into the cave. These are not coincidences. They are evidence that we are joined beneath the surface, that our deepest stories speak the same emotional language, no matter where we are born. And when you dream them, you are part of the telling. You carry the torch a little farther down the tunnel. You hold the memory long enough for it to reach the next dreamer. What does this mean for the individual? It means your dreams are not only about you, they are about us. They carry clues to what the human soul is enduring, fearing, hoping for in this moment of time. They are snapshots of the collective mind, captured in sleep, framed by your personal symbols, but filled with a voice far older than your name. So the next time you dream something that feels too vast, too ancient, too layered with meaning you can't explain, don't dismiss it. Sit with it. Honor it. You may be carrying a piece of a larger message, a shard of human memory passing through you on its way to somewhere else. And that is not a burden. It's a calling, realer than real. There are dreams that feel more vivid than life. Not just strange or intense, but real. Uncomfortably, exquisitely, irreversibly real. You wake from them slowly, reluctantly, with the distinct sensation that you've left somewhere that was more alive than the place you've returned to. The light in the dream had weight. The air had meaning. The emotions were clean and sharp and final. And now, in waking, everything feels muted, like you're moving through fog. We expect dreams to be surreal, to dissolve as the alarm clock rings. But some stay. Some etch themselves into the skin, like experience, not imagination. You remember the smell of the rain in that city that doesn't exist. You remember how it felt when a person you've never met touched your face like they'd waited lifetimes to do it. You remember not because it was fantastical, but because it was true in a way that the waking world rarely allows. This raises a disquieting question. What if some dreams aren't less real than waking, but more? What if reality is not determined by duration, or logic, or repetition, but by impact? And if so, then how do we explain the dreams that change us deeply and forever after a single night? How do we account for grief felt over a dream goodbye, joy from a reunion that never happened, insight that reshapes our waking choices from a conversation that occurred only in sleep? Perhaps what makes something real is not whether it happened, but whether it touched us. The mind struggles with this. It wants lines. It wants labels. Dream. Not dream. Fiction. Fact. But the heart doesn't need those distinctions. It remembers by feeling. It catalogs by resonance. And if a dream leaves a stronger imprint than most of your days ever do, maybe the dream is what deserves the label real. Some dreams feel real because they speak in the language of presence. You are more there than you are in your waking hours. You see clearer. You feel fuller. You exist more completely, unfiltered by the distractions, the roles, the constant hum of survival that follows us through the day. In dreams like this, you are stripped of everything unnecessary. There is only the moment, and you inside it, fully, honestly. Others feel real because they bring us something we've lost. Someone long dead returns, but not as a ghost or a symbol, as themselves, not warped by memory, not abstracted by grief. They sit with you, look at you, tell you things no one else could. And when you wake, the weight of their presence remains undeniable. You ask yourself, was that just a dream? But a quieter voice inside you whispers, does it matter? If the love was real, if the healing was real, if the message was true, then why must the origin be questioned? We are taught to measure the world by its physicality. But what if the soul doesn't care for physics? What if it operates on a different metric altogether? One of meaning, of connection, of truth that bypasses evidence? When people return from near-death experiences, they often say the same thing. It felt more real than this. That phrase repeats again and again, more real than real. A strange choice of words, but the only one that fits. Dreams can feel that way too. And maybe that's not a mistake. Maybe the dream world is not a place of illusion, but of clarity. a realm in which your deeper self, the one unburdened by fear and noise, finally has space to speak, to feel, to remember. Some scientists argue that these ultra-vivid dreams are just the brain firing at high frequency, or a glitch in sleep stages, or an emotional surge processed unconsciously. And perhaps there's truth in that. But science can explain process. It cannot yet explain presence. It can't account for why something that happened in a single REM cycle can feel more important than years of waking life. So what do you do with a dream like this? You honor it, not as fantasy, not as data, as experience. You don't need to explain it to anyone. You don't need to defend it to your logic. You simply let it be what it was, a moment that mattered, a moment that marked you. Because real isn't always what lasts. Sometimes real is what moves you. And dreams, on occasion, move us more than anything we live through with our eyes open. Borrowed grief. You wake with a heaviness that doesn't feel like yours. A sadness that clings to your chest, tight and unmoving. The dream has faded. Its edges blurred, its scenes forgotten. But the weight remains. It's not depression. It's not anxiety. It's something quieter, stranger. It's grief. But here's the unsettling part. You're not grieving anything you remember losing. This is not your sorrow. And yet it lives in your bones, as if it has always been there. This is borrowed grief, the kind of emotion that finds you in dreams without a name, without a face, without origin. It might begin with a vision, a child crying at the edge of a river, a city collapsing in slow silence, a stranger you hold like you've known them forever. You wake and find yourself mourning them. But who were they? And why does their absence feel so real? These dreams do not offer closure. They do not reveal answers. What they give you is sensation, depth. And in that depth, a question. Is it possible to grieve for something you never lived, someone you never met? Science will tell you that emotions in dreams are echoes of your own subconscious, that borrowed grief is simply a misfiring of emotional memory, your brain simulating sadness without a source. But that explanation falters when the feeling doesn't fade, when it haunts you for days, when it makes you pause in the middle of laughter and wonder why you feel like weeping. The truth might be deeper, older. Perhaps the grief we feel in dreams is not always ours to begin with. There are moments when we inherit more than biology, more than eye color or temperament. We inherit emotion. We carry echoes of suffering passed down through generations. Grief that was never fully mourned. Loss that was silenced by survival. Epigenetics has shown us that trauma imprints itself in genes, that descendants of those who lived through horrors can feel their emotional residue. In sleep, when the mind lets go of chronology, perhaps we touch these echoes more clearly. We dream a stranger's sorrow, and in doing so, we remember what was forgotten. But borrowed grief isn't always ancestral. Sometimes it's collective. Sometimes we grieve for the world, for the earth as it was, for lives lived elsewhere, timelines we never touched. In dreams, time and self collapse. You are not just yourself. You are the mother who lost her son in a war you never studied. You are the elder watching the forest die. You are the last breath of a dying planet in a timeline that never reached morning. And you wake up feeling like something sacred slipped away. This kind of grief doesn't always announce itself through images. Sometimes it's just a presence, a weight in the air of the dream, a knowing that cannot be explained. You're sitting at a table with people whose names you don't know, but you love them. You walk through ruins that feel like home. You wake up aching for something the day cannot explain. And that's the most haunting part of borrowed grief. Its silence, its refusal to explain itself, its ability to move through you like a wind that leaves no trace, only a chill. And maybe that's the purpose. Maybe borrowed grief is how the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Maybe it's how we stay connected to what matters, what was lost, what must not be repeated. Perhaps these dreams are not wounds, but warnings, not burdens, but bridges. They carry us into empathy, into humility. They remind us that even in sleep, we are never just alone, never just one. We are part of something wider, woven into a grief so vast and ancient, no single life can contain it. So the next time you wake up mourning a dream you can't remember, or crying for someone you never knew, don't rush to dismiss it. Sit with it. Let it move through you. Not because it makes sense, but because it's real. Borrowed grief is real. And sometimes it is the soul's way of saying, I remember what you forgot. I carry what you could not. I grieve, not for myself, but for all that was once sacred, and all that still could be. Because in the language of dreams, grief is not always sorrow. Sometimes it's a sacred memory echoing across time, waiting for someone, anyone, to feel it again. Nightmare maps. You wake with the image still burned into your mind. A hallway with no end. A stairwell collapsing into blackness. A figure watching from the edge of a ruined city. Your heart races. Sweat clings to your skin. You tell yourself, it was just a dream. But some part of you knows better. It wasn't just terror. It wasn't just chaos. It was something specific. It was trying to show you something. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't random. Maybe what you just experienced was a nightmare map, a cartography of your inner world, drawn not with ink, but with fear. We treat nightmares as interruptions, as glitches in the sleep cycle, emotional noise our brains are trying to discharge. But what if that's not true? What if nightmares are not broken dreams, but coded instructions? What if they're maps, carefully designed by the subconscious, to lead us somewhere we're too afraid to go while awake? A collapsing house, a forest on fire, an ocean rising to swallow you whole. These are not just symbols. They are landmarks, coordinates. Every nightmare has a geography, a logic, a path. And though it may feel incoherent in the moment, the more often you return to it, the more you begin to recognize the terrain. Some people report having the same nightmare for years, decades even. The same house, the same figure, the same rising sense of dread. Over time, the details change, but the structure holds. That's not a malfunction. That's a route, a path your psyche is trying to walk over and over until you finally understand where it's trying to take you. Maybe you're always lost in an airport. Maybe the train never arrives. Maybe the elevator plummets every time you step in. These aren't just stress dreams. They are recurring stations in your psychic landscape. They mark where something inside you got stuck, where a wound was never closed, where a truth was buried instead of faced. Dream analysts often speak in symbols. Teeth falling out means control. Drowning means overwhelm. But beyond the interpretation lies something more primal. Orientation. Your nightmares are helping you orient, not to the world outside, but to the one within. They're saying, here, this is where it hurts. This is where you lost the thread. Think of it this way. Your subconscious doesn't speak in language. It speaks in image, in sensation, in dread. And when a part of you has been silenced too long, ignored, denied, disowned, it doesn't go away. It waits. And when you sleep, it finally has the stage. But it doesn't beg. It doesn't whisper. It screams. It sets fire to the scenery. It floods the basement. It turns the familiar into horror. Not to scare you, but to mark the spot, to make sure you don't miss it. So many people run from nightmares. They medicate. They distract. They suppress. But the dream doesn't stop. It adapts. It finds new forms, new disguises, because the map must be delivered. The message must get through. And that's the terrifying grace of nightmares. They will haunt you, not to punish you, but to guide you. They will terrify you until you listen. Nightmare maps are not meant to be interpreted all at once. They unfold slowly. Repetition is the key. The more you revisit them, write them down, sit with them, ask them questions, the more the geography reveals itself. You begin to see the pattern in the chaos, the logic in the fear, the truth behind the symbols. And what you'll find, if you follow them far enough, is that the nightmare isn't a dead end. It's a door. Behind it is a truth that has been waiting for you, a part of yourself that needs to be seen, a shadow that must be named before it stops chasing you. One man dreams of a burning library again and again. He thinks it's about lost knowledge. But one night, he opens a book in the dream and finds his own name on every page, his fears, his failures, his silence. He wakes up not just afraid, but awake. The nightmare had never been about fire. It had been about forgetting who he was. So don't dismiss your nightmares. Map them. Trace their contours. Mark the doors that never open, the rooms that always shift, the figures who never speak. These are not mistakes. They are coordinates. And when you begin to chart them, you may find you're not wandering aimlessly through terror. You're on a pilgrimage. You're being led. Nightmare maps may be drawn in darkness, but if you follow them, they can take you somewhere honest, somewhere necessary. Not away from fear, but through it. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to step inside the dream you fear the most and read the map it's been drawing for you all along. Mythic recall. There are dreams that arrive not with chaos, but with structure. They feel ancient, not because they are old in time, but because they seem to carry the weight of something long remembered and never explained. In these dreams, you may walk among figures, cloaked in symbols, in landscapes that shimmer with sacred geometry. You may not know the names, the language, or the history, and yet something inside you does. A quiet voice stirs, saying, "You've been here before." This is mythic recall, the return of archetypes and timeless narratives through the veil of sleep. Unlike other dreams that fragment and dissolve upon waking, mythic dreams feel whole, cohesive, almost curated. They unfold with rhythm, with purpose, as if they are not just scenes from your mind, but episodes in a universal story far larger than you. You are not dreaming randomly. You are remembering the collective patterns buried deep in the psychic soil of humankind. Carl Jung called them archetypes, universal figures that appear in myth, art, and dreams across cultures and ages. The wise old man, the wounded healer, the hero's journey, the great mother, the trickster. In dreams, these figures don't introduce themselves. They don't need to. Their presence is enough to stir recognition, as if your soul has always known their faces. They are not fictional. They are elemental. Mythic recall is not imagination. It is architecture. When you dream of climbing a spiraling mountain while carrying someone on your back, it is not just a metaphor. It is the echo of countless journeys before you, of pilgrims, seekers, wanderers who walked similar paths in stories told and untold. When you dream of a temple that crumbles when you speak the truth, you are not inventing it. You are stepping into a script written in humanity's shared memory. And these dreams do not come lightly. They come when your inner world is shifting, when the surface stories begin to fail you, when language and logic can no longer hold the weight of your experience. Myth enters then, not to answer, but to reflect, not to instruct, but to awaken. You might dream of falling into a dark well and meeting a child who shows you your own heart carved in stone, or of standing at the edge of a battlefield with no weapons, only a mirror. These are not stories. These are rites, initiations, invitations into the deeper layers of your psyche, where healing happens not through facts, but through symbols. In mythic dreams, even fear takes on meaning. The dragon is never just a monster. It is the guardian of transformation. The chase is never just about danger. It is the refusal to become. Every setting becomes a stage. Every figure becomes a guide, or a test, or a mirror. And perhaps that is the deeper purpose of mythic recall. Not to entertain or distract, but to remind. To remind you that your story, your suffering, your questions, your longing is not new. That others have walked through similar fire, that the architecture of becoming is ancient, and you are part of it. Your dream is not isolated. It is connected. You are walking trails your ancestors once carved into the collective unconscious. Many people dismiss these dreams because they feel too big, too strange, too ceremonial. They wake up thinking, that was just weird. But myth does not explain itself in bullet points. It speaks in resonance. It waits to be felt, not decoded. And here's something even stranger. People who have never met, never read the same books or shared the same history, often report eerily similar dreams. A staircase that leads into the stars, a library that speaks in light, a storm that transforms everything it touches into animals. These aren't coincidences. They are signals from the mythic layer, a field that remembers for us when we forget who we are. In some indigenous traditions, dreams are seen as the soul's participation in the great story of the world. You don't just dream for yourself. You dream on behalf of your people, your land, your ancestors. When myth appears in sleep, it is a sacred event, a summoning, a chance to remember not just your wounds, but your place. So when you wake from a dream that feels too big, too poetic, too full of symbols to explain, don't dismiss it. Don't ask it to be logical. Ask it to be faithful. Ask it to reveal what it knows that you've forgotten. Because maybe myth never died. It just waited. In dreams,